You are listening to the Why Smart Women podcast, the podcast that helps smart women work out why we repeatedly make the wrong decisions and how to make better ones. From relationships, career choices, finances, to faux fur jackets and kale smoothies. Every moment of every day, we're making decisions. Let's make them good ones. I'm your host, Annie McCubbin, and as a woman of a certain age, I've made my own share of really bad decisions. Not my husband. I don't mean him, though. I did go through some shockers to find him. And I wish this podcast had been around to save me from myself. This podcast will give you insights into the working of your own brain, which will blow your mind. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording, and you are listening on this day. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. Well, hello, smart women, and welcome back to the Why Smart Women podcast. Today I am broadcasting from DY in Sydney's Northern Beaches, and it is the most sparkling, beautiful early autumn day. And for those of you that are regular listeners to the podcast, you all know that I have been sick. I got a really annoying virus, which then resulted in me developing some asthma. So it's been a really lovely 2 weeks, and my voice is still a little bit funny, so I apologise for that, but I'm very, very happy to be back, and thank you to David.
Well,
hello. Say hello into the microphone, okay. David.
Hello. And
don't take over the microphone, just say hello. And thank you to David, who very kindly hosted the podcast for me last week because I sounded like shit. So before David and I launch into our analysis of Louis Theroux's The Manosphere, which takes a bit of unpacking, I would just like to describe to you what happened to me yesterday when, after 2 weeks of being ill, I decided to take both my dogs for a walk down the street to DY Beach. So I had them both on a lead, and before I embarked on the walk, I went and got myself a delicious coffee, which is from my favourite delicious coffee shop. And I'd probably only gone, 300 metres when Yo-Yo, the black groodle, decided to stop for a poo. So what I did was I stopped, and I'm trying to do everything very calmly at the moment because I don't have vast quantities of sort of excess energy. So I just quietly stopped and got the plastic bag out of my little cross body bag, not even a new body bag, an old body bag. I'm keen to shop for a new one. Anyway, and then I put my barely drunk coffee on a bit of low, very, very low bit of sort of wall while I scooped up the poo. And while I was scooping up Yo-Yo's poo, Ryder, my other groodle, pissed on my coffee. So I sort of stood there and I went, right, it's great, thank you. So I finished scooping up the poo and then picked up the now pissed on coffee, which I'd only had one sip of, and went over the road and dumped the poo and the barely drunk coffee in the bin. And I thought, with quite a high degree of recovery and equanimity, I continued on my walk. But when I got back, so I walked down to the beach and back, and then when I got back, I was too embarrassed to go back to the same coffee shop in case they went, because I'm a regular now and they know me. I've got a little card and everything they clip. So I was embarrassed to go, can I have a coffee, in case they went, well, didn't you just get one? And I'd have to go, yeah, but my dog pissed on it. So what I did is I went to another coffee shop, which is my second favourite, and then said, can I have a coffee, and didn't even mention the fact that the dog pissing incident had happened. Anyway, that was my entree into the world of being outside and exercising with my beloved dogs. So now I've got that out of my system. It's quite funny, isn't it, David?
It is.
You need to come much closer to the microphone.
Okay, it's a nice it's a nice segue into a discussion about the manosphere.
It's not, though, is it? Nothing to do with the manosphere.
Well, I mean, Ryder being a male groodle felt entitled.
Entitled to piss on my coffee.
Piss on your coffee.
So typical, isn't it? So typical of male groodles and just men. Anyway, so David and I had the fortune stroke misfortune of watching Louis Theroux's Manosphere. Now, in case any of you, because I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world and how much, I don't know, does everything get delivered to Netflix across the world at the same time? I don't know. Do you think it does, David?
I think so. I think there's been a fairly international response to the documentary, which would suggest to me that, it's been screened everywhere.
Right.
Could be wrong.
So the Louis Theroux, who, as we know, is a very, very famous BBC documentary filmmaker.
Well, this one for Netflix.
Did this for Netflix. Yeah. Was it, do you think it was funded? No.
Yeah.
By who, Netflix or the BBC?
Netflix.
Okay. Anyway, it was really good. So he then, after I think a lot of trouble probably by the producers to get these men who are representative of the manosphere to talk to him, he then did a series of interviews, which we're going to try and unpack from a critical thinking point of view. But they're just incredibly confused, aren't they? You would think that these young men who are fighting for presumably the rights of oppressed men over liberated women, you would think that they had somehow chanced upon this brand new way of viewing gender politics, as opposed to the fact that historically it's always been the same, right? Women have been used by men pretty much for sexual favours, right? Correct? Or in all sorts of contexts. So, I mean, concubines are not new. Mistresses are not new, right? You know, who's the famous biblical, hang on, let me look at my notes, the famous biblical king that had presumably or purportedly had 700 wives.
There was a song, wasn't there?
Who was that? Hang on.
Was it Abraham?
No.
Had many wives and many wives had Father Abraham? Father Abraham had many wives.
Sing
and
that
many
while
wives had Father Abraham. I was one of them, and so were you. I think I've got that completely wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, was it Abraham?
No.
Oh, hang on, Hagar.
No.
What?
It's not. So across the Old Testament, in tomes like the Iliad, the notion of mistresses and concubines and one-way monogamy, which is one of the deeply unfortunate memes that these male influencers propagate, it's not new, right, David? It's not new. They're not fighting a new holy war against the power of women. I mean, I guess the point of that, historically, it's just been, it's the way it's always been. And yet, David, it's like they've suddenly chanced upon this new premise that is in a response to wokeness and feminism, right?
Absolutely. And the thing that I observe is that they are trying to co-opt precedent. They're trying to co-opt science in order to justify themselves. And I think that a little bit of critical thinking, the kind of critical thinking that I know that you champion and you want people to make part of a daily habit, if we apply some critical thinking to their argument and their process and the conclusions that they come to, it really just does come down like a stack of a house of cards. A house of cards. I was actually quite surprised at how many people were themselves surprised by what came up in the Manosphere. I'm part of a chat group with the boys that I went to school with, and some of those guys were absolutely appalled, and it was almost like they hadn't heard about, the goings-on of Andrew Tate and his brother, and so many of the people who are operating in this space. But there you have it, and it's great. I think that this ugly phenomenon is starting to have some light shed on it.
Well, some of the feedback, interestingly enough, on social media, David, has been, why did Louis Theroux give them a platform? So, for instance, how many people would have heard of
Sneeko,
of HS Tiki Toki, HS Tiki Toki, or Sneeko? And before I go on, can I say something about some of them, including Andrew Tate?
Oh, hang on.
Honestly, no, I'm sorry, but they are not that attractive. Like, what is going on here? You would think they were like absolute Adonises. So it comes down to that thing of if you're sort of charismatic and say something appealing in a really certain manner, you can pretty much co-opt people's brains. What do you think?
Just context for those who don't know Louis Theroux, perhaps as we do, we might make that assumption. But he's done some amazing documentaries in the past where he's got this lovely kind of low-key, interested, non-confrontational style. Yeah. One of the very memorable ones was his interviews and his coverage of the Westboro Baptist Church. And this was a really extreme branch of American Christianity who protested at the funerals of servicemen because of some warped rationale that God was killing American soldiers because somehow
there was gay people.
Because there were gay people. He did another takedown of influencers a few years ago, not so much with the gender politics lens on it. He did a documentary on Jimmy Savile, going in search of Jimmy Savile without any doubt about the fact that Savile was a monster. But again, Thoreau's sort of gentle inquiring documentary style is tremendously effective because he gets people on screen revealing themselves in their motivation. And he did this very effectively with the Manosphere. And, most of the people who he interviewed had not heard of Louis Theroux beforehand, and their audiences were warning them, don't let him go anywhere near you, it'll be a takedown. And so,
But these boys, these influencer boys are so deeply simplistic in their thinking and live in such a narrow context. I'd never heard of him. And by the way, if anybody's interested, Louis Theroux is the son of Paul Theroux. And Paul Theroux is one of the funniest and best travel writers I have ever read, just in case you're interested.
Yeah. Okay, but before we get into the science of the Manosphere, I think that the documentary, Thoreau's documentary, has exposed something really important. And it's not that these men have a coherent philosophy. What they have is a business model.
Yeah, it's so right.
So the first central character that he interviewed was a guy called H.S. Tiki Toki. And H.S. Tiki Toki himself said to camera, I've always been a salesman. I'm a salesman now. It's a business model. They create content that gets attention. Attention creates revenue. Misogyny is the product and young men's insecurity is the market. And this is important because when we pick apart their ideas, we are not engaging with serious thinkers. We are examining the propaganda of a monetized grievance industry. They deserve a precise rebuttal, but not a particularly elevated one. So, here's what makes it dangerous. They have borrowed the vocabulary of real science, and that's what we need to talk about.
So before we go into the vocabulary of real science, just to that question that I posited before about people are saying, well, it's not the right thing because he's given them a platform. Do you think that's wrong? Because what it does is actually allow people to have discourse about dangerous ideas, because I want to talk about the boys in DY Go.
Yeah, no, precisely what you just said is true. When they operate in the shadows, then bad things happen, and then we turn around and we go, how did we get here? There's an inquiry into what went wrong that preceded the massacre in Bondi and the shooting in Bondi. We need to be able to look at cause and effect clearly, accurately, accountably, authentically, and there's lots of different ways of doing it. One way is a royal commission, another way is a documentary series. So yeah, look, I think it's absolutely legitimate, and when we see them, we can see how their argument falls down.
So here in DY, Sydney, New South Wales, Australia, a long way from Miami or
Walker.
Ibiza. Interestingly enough, so HS Tiki Toki, who was the first one that Theroux interviewed, was in some massive. It was Ibiza, was it?
Yeah, he was in Ibiza.
Yeah,
he was out of the country because he had a car accident.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And he fled.
And he's driving around in a Maserati in this house
Lamborghini,
talking about his money, because in their shallow and narrow framework, wealth is the only thing. It's the new armor, right, in their holy war. Anyway, so apparently the place he's living in Ibiza is an Airbnb.
Right.
And the car is rented.
Right.
So the whole thing,
it's
of course, it's exactly, it's all theatre. But what I was going to say was that even here in Australia, which is far removed from Ibiza or where the American guy who's one-way monogamy, that guy, whereas he's Miami.
They're a long way away, but they're connected by the internet.
They're connected by some of the kids around here, we have noted, the 14 and 15-year-olds are really the sort of rhetoric, the unprovoked rhetoric that comes out their mouths, pretty awful. And even this morning when we were crossing the road, I was you and we were crossing the road with the dogs, and there were those boys on the bike, on an e-bike.
The fat wheel e-bike.
And they were right, like almost touching the back of my leg with the e-bike. Mm-hmm. And it felt, I don't know. I mean, it's in the middle of the day and I'm with you. I mean, it's okay.
It's menacing.
But it was sort of a bit frigging menacing. I said, back up. Don't get so close to my legs. Do you mind? Yeah. And but there's something, it's when you are in this is the whole point about the vulnerability of their market, David. You feel alienated, you feel disenfranchised, and somebody gives you a message that you don't have to be part of the matrix, which is some made up bullshit thing. You don't have to, you can be a red pill boy, right? And you can have freedom and women can be your playthings, and that's the message. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's a very appealing message if you're young and 15 and don't see a lot of prospects.
And what is dangerous is that it's packaged up as truth, that this is the truth. This is what the science tells us about what men and women are, and therefore this truth justifies this behaviour. So, look, let's talk about, for a moment, what the evolutionary biology actually says. Some of it is genuinely uncomfortable, and
that's okay.
That's okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a work that was written by a linguist and a philosopher and a scientist, Steven Pinker. And Steven Pinker, in his seminal How the Mind Works, which I think was first published in 1997, it draws on decades of evolutionary psychology to make this argument that the human mind is a collection of adaptations that have been shaped by natural and sexual selection. Right? The human mind isn't a blank slate. Males and females do not arrive at mating with identical psychological defaults. And why is that? Because parental investment is asymmetric. Scientist Robert Trivers identified this in 1972, and Richard Dawkins built on it in The Selfish Gene. And here's the core of it. The female gamete, the egg, is costly. It is scarce, and it comes with 9 months of physical commitment.
With potentially a lot of vomiting and discomfort.
Yes, exactly. Extremely costly. The male gamete, that sperm, is actually cheap and plentiful. So evolution, which is indifferent to fairness, shapes psychology around those facts. So males tend toward a bias for sexual variety and short-term opportunity. Females tend towards selectivity, assessing commitment, the quality and security. And look, this is a real pattern. It shows up across cultures. And Pinker, in his work, he doesn't pretend otherwise.
Hang on. I have to question you here? Because it almost sounds like, because what they're saying, right, is the influencers, is that one-way monogamy, so you can have as many partners as you want, but I can't. And then what they come down, the side they come down in is, well, that's because women don't want a whole lot of partners and men do. It sounds like you're backing that idea, David.
Okay, well, I'm not backing that idea. In fact, what I would like to go on to explain is why, where the faults are in the argument. Look, this is everything. Pinker, he doesn't pretend that our psychology is, shaped in this way. He doesn't pretend otherwise. But he also says this, that these are average statistical tendencies. They're not ironclad laws. They are shaped by culture and context and individual variation and choice. And he's explicit. None of this is grounds for discrimination, entitlement, which is what I was talking about in the podcast last week. None of this is actually grounds for entitlement or hierarchy. Now, what the Manosphere does is they take the first part of the science selectively and they stop there. Okay? Steve Pinker doesn't.
Okay, yeah, that sort of makes perfect sense. It's just classic cherry picking, right?
Yeah.
This is the way we're biologically driven, and this is and so. But do you actually want a concubine? Is that what we're heading? Do you want one?
I don't know whether we put her. And how do you know that it's a her?
Oh yeah, you make a good point.
Yeah,
Plus, we've only got 2 bedrooms.
That's right.
Thanks for tuning in to Why Smart Women with me, Annie McCubbin. I hope today's episode has ignited your curiosity and left you feeling inspired by my anti-motivational style. Join me next time as we continue to unravel the fascinating layers of our brains and develop ways to sort out the fact from the fiction and the over 6,000 thoughts we have in the course of every day. Remember, intelligence isn't enough. You can be as smart as paint, but it's not just about what you know, it's about how you think. And in all this talk of whether or not you can trust your gut, if you ever feel unsafe, whether it's in the street, at work, in a car park, in a bar, or in your own home, please respect that gut feeling. Staying safe needs to be our primary objective. We can build better lives, but we have to stay safe to do that. And don't forget to subscribe, rate and review the podcast and share it with your fellow smart women and allies. Together, we're hopefully reshaping the narrative around women and making better decisions. So until next time, stay sharp, stay savvy, and keep your critical thinking hat shiny. This is Annie McCubbin signing off from Why Smart Women. See you later. This episode was produced by Harrison Hess. It was executive produced and written by me, Annie McCubbin.